Welcome to Moving Conversations, a podcast for movement professionals by movement professionals. If you coach, train, or teach movement, Pilates, or fitness, then this podcast is for you. With more than 60 years of experience in fitness and Pilates, your hosts, Brian Ritchie and Nora St. John, explore the science of human movement, diving deep into the facts, myths, and common misconceptions, hoping to spark thought and conversation about how we view fitness and movement. Now, let's jump into Moving Conversations. And welcome back to Moving Conversations. I'm Brian Ritchie. Joining me as always is Nora St. John. Good morning, Nora. How are you today?
Very well. Thank you, Brian. It's nice and sunny here and a little chilly. Although this is California, so it's California chilly. How are you doing?
I was going to say, you cannot complain, girl. You cannot complain.
Well, I can, but for many of you will have no sympathy.
Yeah, I was going to say, for those of us on the East Coast or in the North, it's been a little chilly. It's when I saw that we might expect, an inch or two of snow. And for some reason, Washington, D.C. is in this weird bubble. We don't get a lot of snow. North and south of us get more so than we do. But when I saw that, I was like, oh, man. But I'm still crossing my fingers that it just blows past and it should be fine. It's just going to be, a little damp weather. Let's hope. But nice. I'm looking forward. By the time this episode drops, it'll be into February, which will be nice. It'll be starting to get a little bit warmer. Like I said, my wife every day comes and says, it's getting, lights, it's staying light longer. It's staying light longer. Yes. I'm like, by about 3 minutes a day.
It's okay,
Slow
man.
your roll.
It really does help.
Oh, it does. It totally does. After about 2 weeks, you're like, oh yeah. I don't know if you ever noticed this, if you spent enough time in the North or whatnot. But I had a client once tell me that February 3rd is the date that most people begin to realize, hey, the days are starting to get longer.
Mm.
And
yeah,
I was kind of wondering about that because that's when he said that, I said, I don't think so. But I'm like, yeah, that kind of is, at least around this area.
Is it like Groundhog Day or something?
That's true. Groundhog Day is right around there.
Is it one of those
second,
days,
I think.
Day?
Yeah.
I mean, I think some of it is, it's often so gray,
uh-huh.
right? It can be so gray in kind of January that you don't really notice that there's more light until you get, a patch of better weather. And then someone's like, hey, wait a minute, I'm coming home. For me, it was always, I'm coming home and it's not dark.
Yes.
Right? Like you come home at the same time every day and you come home and it's not dark. Oh, okay. The sun's coming back. Hallelujah.
Exactly. So I'm looking forward to having a little warmer weather. Hopefully it'll be here before too long. But listen, do us a favor, hit that like and subscribe button. We really appreciate it. You can always reach out to us at movingcombos@gmail.com. Instagram is the best way to keep in touch. Also, you can DM us there and check out all of our anatominis and a lot of our shorts and things like that. We've been posting a lot of those lately to try and generate a little bit more buzz, a little bit more interest, and get a few more people to listen into the podcast. We really appreciate it. So like, comment, and help spread movement as we know it, as we like to say. So now that that's aside, today's topic, we talked a little bit about low back pain, and I thought, you know what? One thing we haven't spoken about was how does fascia affect low back pain? Because fascia has been that catchword now for, it's been probably at least 10 years. And we're learning more and more about it all the time, but it can definitely affect low back pain. And I thought, since we're talking about low back pain, why don't we dive into this a little bit today and chat a little about this?
Nice. And, some of you who've watched some of our fascia episodes from the early in our career, basically early in moving
the early days.
The early days. Fascia has really, fascia science is continually evolving. It really is. So, even anything that we say today may be not true tomorrow. And there's a lot of theories, and some of them are played out, some of them aren't. Sometimes have a theory and then they try some research and it turns out to be true and not true. So we're still in a state of figuring out a lot of stuff. But yeah, Brian, what's fascia? What is fascia?
Well, that's a loaded question. Let me tell you, that is a loaded question. Best way to describe it for me is it's connective tissue. It helps, it surrounds, interpenetrates all the muscular systems of the body as well as organs. I once heard it described that if you took out the fascial system as one whole unit of the human body and had it stand up like a human, it would actually most closely resemble what a human form would look like, because it's that much part of all of our systems.
Yeah, and that's one of the things about fascia. Sometimes people talk about fascia as if it's a separate thing. It's not a separate
Mhm.
thing. It is completely interconnected with certainly our muscular system, our organs, and even with our nervous system. So just yeah. I like that image though, that if you took all the fascia out and stood it up, it would like stand up. I mean,
Yeah.
not that it would necessarily, but that you would have the structure, because that really what it is. It creates the structure of the human form, and everything else kind of gloms onto it. It creates like the scaffolding, if you will, that
Mhm.
everything else attaches to.
I like that thought is the scaffolding. I don't know if you ever heard this. When we first started talking about fascia, not you and I, but when in the fitness industry, fascia was first talked about, it was like, okay, have you ever taken skin off of a chicken? You know that
Yeah.
thin layer between the skin and the meat? Well, that's fascia. And that was such a basic preschool way of looking at what fascia really is. I mean, is it? Sure. But there's so much more to it than just that. That when you're trying to explain it to a client, sure, that might be an easy way for them to get a general sense of it. Because if you try and get any deeper than that, you're going to see their eyes are going to glaze over and they're going to fall asleep on you. But that's at least how I had heard of it, 15 years ago or something. Is that kind of how you first heard about it, when people started talking about this?
That was certainly one analogy. The other one was really, from my anatomy stuff, looking at muscle structure, right? And you've
Mhm.
got like the myofibrils, then you have the endometrium, and then the paramecium, or endomecium and the paramecium. And so you start to see how the little fascial layers surrounded every single little bundle, like kind of every
Mhm.
cell, and then every group of cells, and then the whole muscle, and then how all those fibers kind of form tendons. So for me, it was more like understanding that it really does create the scaffolding on which all the cells that are more lively, because connective tissue, doesn't well, it does things, but it doesn't do things
Mhm.
like muscles, right? It's not contractile. It's not a an organ cell that has particular functions. It really is designed to create the structure that things sit on.
Mhm. And that's a great way to put it. I mean, I'd never heard of it as really termed as scaffolding, but kind of it is. When I first moved to Washington, D.C., they were redoing the Washington Monument. So they had the scaffolding around the
Mm,
outside. So that was my first image I ever saw of it that
yeah,
wasn't on
yeah,
television, was the scaffolding around it. And
yeah.
anybody who's been to New York City knows the best business to be in is the scaffolding business, because every block there's some scaffolding going up where people are working on buildings. If anybody's ever been in New York, you know what I'm talking about. You're always
Always.
walking under scaffolding. But it's true. And a great way that when you said that, I literally thought of the scaffolding that was across the street from a hotel that I was staying at, that actually was covered with this muslin sort of thing that I
Yeah.
guess kept heat in or something, because it was in the winter. And so they were able to sort of heat where the workers were working. But it was interesting that the scaffolding and then the muslin layer over that surrounding this entire building. And that's kind of really what we're talking about when it comes to our system, is that all of our muscular system, organs, all of that, this does provide that scaffolding. It's an interesting way to look at it.
And we talk about specifically the thoracolumbar fascia. Um, it really, like the fascia of the low back, it really is the thoracolumbar fascia and related structures, and how that structure is built and how that structure moves or doesn't move completely affects how we experience movement, how our spine feels, how
Mhm.
our rotation feels, how it feels when we lean over, how it feels when we extend. So that's where, fascia and the low back really come together.
Well, fascia, what I find interesting is, even though it doesn't have necessarily contractile ability that it contracts on its own, it does sort of have a fibrous network, in that the fibers lay in one direction, or are supposed to, but sometimes they become more fibrous, and those fibers lay at awkward angles or odd angles, and that can create stiffness, that can create, areas that don't sort of loosen up. And anybody who's worked with someone who's, I'm going to say it, a 50, 60-year-old man, their low back doesn't want to move. That spine in general is incredibly stiff. We see that. I use men because it's almost every single guy I have. We start off with that, and we have to work on trying to create flexibility there. But that thoracolumbar fascia really becomes almost fibrous and just dense. And you can feel it. If you ever touch their back, it's sort of like, wow, that's a solid piece of rock almost.
One of the things I say a lot is we build our own fascial suit.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you think about that with the low back, or you think about anywhere really, fascia gets thicker when the body needs more support in that area.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So one example I have is, like, and you guys can do this at home. If you come up and you feel the top of your shoulder blade and kind of the back, kind of medial superior border, the bottom back tip of your scapula, you'll feel a really tight band of tissue there. It's like this levator scapulae. But basically that's so tight because that tissue, that connective tissue there, has had to really work hard and lay down a lot more stiff connective tissue to hold your scapula up.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So what we do and what habits we have and how we hold ourselves, what our posture is, will build more connective tissue to support that area. And with a low back, that's classic.
Absolutely. And just in what you were holding on to with the levator scapula, when you add in forward head posture and rounded shoulders and all of that, for prolonged periods of time and less movement, that can become even more rigid and a lot tighter and just very fibrous tissue.
Right. And that's what happens with the low back. Again, if the muscles can't quite do the job, is how I often describe it, then the fascia kind of comes in to reinforce it. But fascia isn't elastic particularly, right? It doesn't have that nice, lovely blood supply that the muscles have. It doesn't have that kind of vitality. So, it's like taking something that's really kind of juicy and squishy and making it stiffer and stiffer, which decreases some of the circulation and stuff.
And lack of movement is a great way to create that stiffness.
Right.
Just
exactly.
not moving at all, which a lot of our clients that come in, and a lot of people who are listening to this who may not be in the fitness industry are just like, yeah, I do have low back pain, and I haven't exercised in the last 15 years. I haven't really done a whole lot. Well, guess what? That's going to happen. If sitting is your biggest activity, let's face it, that area is just going to get stiffer and stiffer.
I had a good client of mine who was having low back pain. The other thing with low back pain is when we're in pain, and this is generally true, we tend to move less, right? If it hurts, I'm going to move less. And oftentimes that's a very, very natural reaction. It's a protective reaction. It's often not the best thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because if you stop moving, there's something hurts, and then you stop moving, that often means you decrease circulation. You're not getting lubrication of the fascia. You're not getting blood supply. You're not getting all those things that actually might help the thing to heal.
Yeah.
So I think about, again, this one client, if any of you have done something like pinwheel or telescope arms, where you're lying sideways and you take the arm.
Hook openers.
Yeah, exactly. Either circle up over your head or open it close. You go into rotation and come back. And it was fascinating because with his low back pain, he had literally stopped moving his entire spine. So that whole opening came just from the shoulder. I'm sure you've seen that as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, so you have basically taken your entire back and turned it into concrete. And we need to break up that concrete. Yeah. We need to kind of give it some life, give it some juice, give it some mobility, give it some lubrication. And finding the gentle movement that can do that is really important for the thoracolumbar fascia.
Absolutely. And if you think about it as a super highway, where all the roads are going one direction, then you can see that there's going to be movement in that direction. And what movement you are doing on a regular basis, you're building that fascial suit. It will want to do that. And those fibers can run that way. But when you're not moving, those fibers can run in all sorts of different ways, like 20 different roads coming into the same spot. Well, guess what? There's going to be a traffic jam. There's not going to be any movement. And that's what's going to happen to your body, basically. You're going to get stuck and you're not going to be able to move, which, let's face it, I love how your analogy was when you get in pain, you move less. That is everybody's initial response. And that's a good one. It's a good response at the beginning because guess what? Anytime you do move, if you have any spasm, it locks you up. But after a couple days, guess what? Movement actually helps. And I always tell people, move with what your body will allow you to do. If you can
Right.
move even gently, don't force it. Don't go beyond what your body wants to do, but explore and investigate. I love using those words with clients. I said, just investigate with what you can do. Can you just turn your shoulders a few degrees? Oh, I can do that. All right, cool. How about turning the other way? Yeah, it's a little tighter, but yeah, I could do that. All right. So something as simple as that becomes an exercise. It's just a little bit of rotation this way and that way, but investigating on what doesn't cause pain rather than I am in pain and I will not move ever again. This is how I'm going to stay the rest of my life. That's not
Which
realistic, but it's what
no,
we've
but
encountered though. And some people come
it's
to
what we
us.
do. It's a very natural, like, protective response.
Absolutely.
So we've kind of been throwing out the term thoracolumbar fascia at will, like kind of here,
Yep.
thoracolumbar fascia. What the heck is that? So
Yeah. What is it?
right? Thorax, lumbar, thoracolumbar fascia connects the rib cage essentially to the pelvis and into the hips. And the interesting thing about the thoracolumbar fascia is structure-wise, it has many different layers. So on the superficial level, if you're looking at the back of a body, and especially if you're looking at an anatomy illustration, you'll see a very nice kind of triangle or diamond
Mhm.
shape where the latissimus dorsi comes down, comes into the fascia of the back, and then you have like a little triangle that goes down to the top of the pelvis and then down to the sacrum-ish. Okay, so you got
Ish.
to picture that. Yeah, that's the outside layer of the thoracolumbar fascia. So it's the the tendon essentially of the lat, and then going into kind of the gluteal fascia down in the hips. But inside that, it connects directly through the fascia to the transverse abdominis, to our erector spinae, even around our quadratus lumborum. And if you kind of expand that definition, even onto the psoas. So
Mhm.
it really interconnects all of those important muscles that support the low back.
And if you think about it, what are we talking about when we talk about the core? We're not talking about just your abs. We're
Right.
talking about all the way around. So the thoracolumbar fascia is a huge component because it does help to interpenetrate and connect some of these muscles together so that they work together in a most efficient and effective way. So that they work together rather than trying to work separately.
Right, it connects them because
Mhm.
honestly, we always talk about, pulling the abdominals in supports the low back, like that's a classic thing, right? Pull
Mhm.
your abdominals in before you do this or that. But the the muscles that do that, primarily your transverse abdominis, doesn't actually attach directly to the spine. It
Right.
attaches through the fascia to the muscles around the spine. So it was one of those like the first time I realized that, because for years I'd heard, oh, pull your stomach in, pull your stomach in, pull your stomach in to support your back. Okay, got it. But then I was like, wait a minute, it doesn't connect to my back. How does this work? And
Yes.
that's really where some of the theories of thoracolumbar fascia as part of the core come in. Because it's like you got to have that connection from those muscles into all that area around the spine to support the spine.
And it's a great way to think about it because most people don't realize, especially with the transverse abdominis, you suck that in and that does support your low back. Absolutely right. But where does it attach? And when you look, it says in a lot of the old anatomy books, it basically goes around is how they would describe it. Those fibers are, around the abdominals. Okay. And they'd say it goes into, I've heard the low back, I've heard the aponeurosa, which a lot of people have used instead of thoracolumbar fascia 20, 30 years ago. And yes, it does go into that. Absolutely. But like you said, those other muscles that are connected to that, they all will have an effect on your abdominals and conversely, your abdominals will have an effect on what's happening to the muscles of the lumbar spine.
Exactly. And as we build our fascial suit, how we sit, how we stand, how we hold our rib cage, which side of our hips we lean onto, which hand we're dominant with, how we, what
Mhm.
sports we play, all those things can create different kinds of tension through the thoracolumbar fascia, and that's where you often get uneven pulls on the spine, which then can lead to trouble over time.
You know what? I can't tell you how many clients here in Washington, D.C., I sort of joke, we're primarily made up of lawyers, consultants, lobbyists, and
Yes.
psychologists, psychiatrists. They all support each other. So,
Uh-huh.
but I'm going to take that last group, okay? The psychologist, psychiatrist, because I've seen so many of them come and go, and most of them have a very unique pattern that is seen just to that group. And it's because they're sitting with someone they need to write. So what do? They cross their left knee over their right knee, and they rotate their body to the left to write on their leg, basically, or on a pad.
That's so funny. Just like psychiatrist back.
It is. It's one of those things.
So funny.
I've had dentist neck. So yes, it's like
Yes.
psychiatrist back, because they rotate and they stay that way for the entire
Yeah.
hour. And
Yeah.
then the next person for the entire hour, and the next person. And as I kept seeing these people, I kept noticing, you know what? All of you rotate to the left. Your hips are a little askew because they cross their one knee over the other. So their hips are a little jacked up and they're rotated. And when you get them to stand up, their body naturally wants to turn to the left. And to get them to stand straight, they say, it feels like I'm turning to the right. It's like, well, no, you're pretty straight right now. But it's a lot like that person who has their computer monitor always to the left for so many
Yeah.
years. Well, guess what? Their body is naturally going to go to the left. Or who's right-handed, who writes a lot, their body is going to want to lean on the desk. So their forearm is on the paper. So they're going to lean. All of those things that we do habitually over the years will begin to build that fascial suit. And when it comes to the spine, that rotation, we see that. And guess what? As a fitness professional, movement professional, we've got to learn how to unwind that a little bit and get them to be able to do it the other way to get proper movement. Because if not, guess what? They're going to get stuck facing that way
Forever.
forever.
So one thing that was useful to me in understanding this was I've done a reasonable amount of dissection, a bit of dissection over the years of fresh frozen or lightly preserved cadavers where you can really see the fascia. And man, you take off the skin layer and you look at the angles of it, because you can see the fibers. You can literally see
Mhm.
like fibers going this way, fibers going that way. And oftentimes there's multiple layers of fibers. And you look at the thoracolumbar fascia, the superficial layer of it, and the fibers are sometimes all going in one direction across the midline.
Mm.
Right? You really will see, you'll see like they're thicker, because let's say going from in your case, they rotate to the left, going from the left shoulder to the right hip. Like you'll just look at it and those, you'll see those fibers are much thicker and more defined than the fibers in the other direction.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that's building their fascial suit.
Mhm.
And one of the things about that as a fitness professional is I think, well, that's a lot of years of habit, and that's
Mhm.
a lot of connective tissue to change. So,
Mhm.
one of the things is mobility certainly helps. Mobility will take a while. So it can take, they
Mhm.
say, 6 to 24 months to change fascia. So it may be a while if you if you see those imbalances.
But it's worth doing. Most people
Yeah.
think of building their fascial suit, and I've had a lot of people say this, and fitness professionals say, well, you see it a lot in sports people because,
Yeah.
baseball
Right.
pitchers, their right glute is going to be bigger than their left, and their one side, because they're swinging one direction, it's going to have more. Absolutely. And you can tell that with tennis players, you can tell that with golfers, sure. But habitually, we do things on a regular basis, just us, not sports people, not even the weekend warrior, that just the way we sit in our car. How many times have you gotten into someone's car and tried to drive it and their seat is kind of at this weird angle that one hip is lower than the other? And you're like, what the
You're
heck
like,
is this?
what's happening here?
I actually had a car that when I drove it for years, my dad got in it and he said, what's wrong with your seat? And it's because every time I sat in it to reposition myself, I pushed against the steering wheel and I pushed my right shoulder back. That literally my seat, the right side by the headrest was actually shifted back about 1.5 inches. But I didn't notice it because I was that way. It was always that way. And it moved, a millimeter at a time over the years.
Right.
But someone who comes in for the first time who sees that, they're like, oh my gosh, but guess what? I'd been sitting that way for how long?
You built your car seat, Brian. You didn't build your fascial suit. You built your
my car seat. But that car seat was then building my fascial suit because I drove all the time. Just think about right now, as you're sitting in your seat, okay, or in your car, or if you're sitting, do you feel yourself more on one cheek or the other? Are you leaning on one elbow more than the other? Are you sitting upright? Are you twisted a little bit? All of these things you're going to find you do habitually because we all do it. And as you do that, you're reinforcing that fascial suit. You're putting like a suit of armor, you're just laying down more metal in one direction over the years. And guess what? It's going to get rusty and it's not going to want to move after a while.
I love that. My thoracolumbar fascia is rusty. So we need oil can, right?
We need oil.
Like,
exactly.
I need the oil can.
Need a little WD-40 for my joints.
Oh. And one of the things that you said earlier that just, from a movement perspective, how do we change this, right? That's always kind of what we're trying to aim for here. The things that really help the thoracolumbar fascia are rotation and lateral flexion. So flexion and extension help a little bit, but I really find that you have to work the two sides differently. So you have to work some unilateral work, you have to work some rotation, you have to work some lateral flexion, because that's really where you see the imbalances just kind of dramatically, to your point on the psychiatrist rotation, right? That you'll see like, oh, they always rotate this way. And so you've got to work on getting that rotation to even happen in the other direction.
And how many of us have clients, and myself included, where one side of their erector spinae or quadratus lumborum is so much tighter than the other? I already know I stretch my right side twice as much as I do my left because it is chronically tight. I've got some spinal issues. I'm 54 years old. I'm going to have some, that's just life. But I find myself stretching that side so much more than the other because that's the side I'm tightest on. And that's the way I built that fascial suit over the years. And yes, over the last 5 years or so, I've created a lot more flexibility and things have gotten great. But there are many years that I was scared to move it and that I didn't want to. And that's where our clients are coming from. They're trying to protect it. And you're right. Rotation and lateral flexion are the two things that they lose because most of what we do is in that sagittal plane. It's forward and back. It's flexion and extension. Most of our exercises fall into that category. So if we're not putting them into our programming of doing things that involve some rotation, of doing things that involve some lateral flexion, you're really missing out on something that could be very important in getting your clients back as healthy as possible.
And to what you said earlier, of course, if the thoracolumbar fascia is the issue, if it's just really tight or really imbalanced, it's going to take time. And you want to just do the movement that they can do and keep gently working it, right? Because you can really irritate things by going too far. You can certainly over rotate and cause some trouble, or do sort of aggressive side bending, kind of like aggressive mermaids and Pilates, and get a little bit irritated in the area. And you don't want the irritation because inflammation will also increase the laying down of collagen. Oftentimes in directions you don't want it to go. So you want to, again, minimize inflammation as best you can, but keep the movement happening.
And remember that joints in general, joints like to be stable. So if something does have pain or whatnot, the body will try and lay down more collagen and more fibers to try and limit that range of motion because it wants to protect it. That's just natural, innate on our body's behalf. However, that's going to limit what we can do. So we need to eventually get into that movement pattern. We want to go into lateral flexion. We want to go into rotation. That is super important for us just in general and in life to be able to do these things. How many of us sleep on our side? You're trying to get out of bed lying on your side. Guess what? That's lateral flexion. You have to have some of that. Getting out of a car, There's so many times when we do that rotation and lateral flexion, we need that movement in our life on a daily basis.
Absolutely. Otherwise, life gets very difficult. If you've ever tried to go through a day without without either of those things, it's actually, you guys might try it once just to recognize like, oh, this really doesn't work very well. So many things
No.
get difficult. Try to put your shoes on without really flexing or moving, like keeping your spine very square and stiff. Unless you're very, very flexible everywhere, it's gonna be a little tricky.
Yep. But I will say this, look at like a 70-year-old, 75-year-old person. A lot of times when they realize they can't do anything anymore, instead of coming at it from a movement perspective and say, I need to be able to get up and down off the floor, they just decide, I'm never going down there again. That's so far away. I'm never going on the floor again. So even for them, I had a client who wanted me to help him find grabbers, things that he could pick up his shoes with, and long shoe horns. That's what it is, a shoe horn, so they can put their shoe on. They didn't want to have to tie and untie their shoes. And part of me is thinking, yes, I want to help them out because I want to make their life more valuable so they can do more. But at the same time, I want to get them to move better, so that they can get up and down off the floor, so that they can put on their shoes by crossing their legs or doing something like that. So there comes a balance point where, yes, I want to help you, but I don't want to enable you to not move anymore either.
Right. That there certainly becomes an age and a mentality and a personality where that's what you're fighting, right? More than anything else. Yeah.
Yep.
So Brian, do you have a good thoracolumbar fascia client story?
Oh, I've got tons. I've got tons. It's like, oh, which one? I'm looking through my Rolodex right now. That ages me. Sorry, my database, I should say, not Rolodex. It kind of ages me. No, in general, I think of my older gentlemen. I have one gentleman who just started with us not too long ago, who his back is just unbelievably tight. Unbelievably tight. I tried to get day before yesterday, just to do a little bit of a pelvic tilt. Just introduce a pelvic tilt to him. He couldn't do it. He couldn't even fathom the idea of what that meant. I kept trying to, because I was trying to teach him a bridge and I wanted to do an articulating bridge. So I was trying to get him to scoop in using your abdominals, try and get a little bit of that posterior, and nothing was coming. I mean, he was a rock. Nothing was coming. And it took a while for me to I had to let certain things go and just, okay, if I get a couple of centimeters today, I'll be happy. But I told him, this should be what you look like. And I had to demonstrate, here's where you should be able to. And I demonstrated the rolling up and down. And I'm not perfect. Again, I'm a guy and I'm older and I don't move as well as I used to, but I'm a little more supple than this guy was. So I demonstrated and he was like, isn't that what I'm doing? And I said, here's what you're doing. And I showed him and he went, oh. And he literally couldn't get into that position. So I said, here's what, we're just going to work toward this. So again, I wanted him to do what he could. And the interesting thing that I find with some clients is it's not that they feel tight. It's just that they don't have the concept of how to do this, on how to move. They can't feel it.
Yeah. That's kind of what I'm thinking about this, guys, is like sometimes that lack of ability to move is tissue tightness or joint issues. Sometimes it's just like their motor control. They've never done that before.
Yes.
Right. So they're just so unfamiliar with the movement, even as a concept, that they can't get there.
And I had my hands on his hips. I mean, I was getting really close and I know more about this gentleman than I ever wanted to, man. I mean, I was in there, but I wanted him to feel that movement.
Right.
And so he understood, and literally his movement was very, very small. And again, I got maybe an inch. Okay. That's a start. Over the next 6 months, I'm assuming I'm probably going to get 4 inches, maybe 5 if I'm lucky. But again, it's going to take time. It's going to really take time. And I find that time is one of those things that we have to really work on slowly and just allow it. We are in such, I hate to say this, and be the old man yelling, "Get off my lawn," but we're in an age of instant gratification now. We have everything at our fingertips. I tell this to my kids all the time. I said, there was a time when we had to wait for our favorite television show to come on and not hit on demand.
Right.
And so for our bodies, we're sort of used to, oh, I should be able to just do this. But anybody who's tried to learn a sport at an older age, whether it be pickleball, golf, tennis, whatever it is, there's a learning curve. And the same thing goes with the body. It's going to be a learning curve on trying to get your body to do what you think it should be able to, and allow that it's going to take some time, maybe 6 months, maybe longer. And that's okay.
I always say the brain is fast and the body's slow.
Yeah.
The brain can decide that it should be able to do X, Y, and Z, like instantaneously. Like, oh, I should be able to touch my toes. Okay, I got that idea, that concept, for example.
Yep.
But actually getting the body to do it takes time, repetition, patience, all the things that, to Brian's point, people are not really very excited about these days.
We're not patient at all. I will say,
No.
During the pandemic, and I've told you this story before, I'll relate it again. I decided, because I was coming into my studio, very few people were coming in. I was doing mostly online, but I had a gym to myself. And I said, you know what I'm going to work on? My hips have always been tight in general, my left one. Or so I could cross one ankle over one knee and get it almost parallel with the ground. And the other one was up at like 40, 45 degrees. It was very high and just wouldn't drop to save my life. So guess what? I devoted at least a year and a half to get that to drop down. And I used, the ladder barrel, Pilates ladder barrel, and I put my leg up there and I just leaned forward as far as I could go and try to let that leg relax down. And I just investigated on what felt to be too much, what felt to be just right. And when I hit to just right, I'd say, okay, I'm going to stay here 30 seconds. Now maybe another millimeter or two, hold that for 30 seconds. And I tried to literally inch my way down. But after 18 months, they were perfectly balanced. Each one was level. But again, it took a year and a half of diligent work. It wasn't just, oh, I'll do it one day this month.
No.
It requires work.
Dogged effort. It really takes dogged effort. And yes, certainly when you're older, it does. For sure.
Yeah.
That does change a lot. You're less pliable. But at any age, it's like it just takes work. I worked with a client who had really tight hip flexors, really tight hip flexors. And her goal was, she was a yogi and she really wanted to be able to do a full back bend. But she really couldn't, because she just couldn't open her hips enough to do that.
Sure. And
so I gave her a couple different exercises. One is like this monster quad stretch that I do, and then some other hip openers. She was one of the more disciplined clients I've ever had. Like, she really worked it like 3 times. She was
goal oriented.
She was goal oriented. She would do her stretches, and man, when she, I keep a regular eye on her. And after about 6 months, she was able to go into a pretty full back bend. Nice. With the hips being open, and the hips going into extension, and she had the support. It was wonderful. But again, 6 months, maybe it was even 9 months. It was quite a thing. So you can make some of those changes, and you just have to, again, persistence, dogged persistence.
And when we have a client who has, like the psychologists that I was telling you about, who they've spent so many years in one position that we are trying to unwind that, we can create the perfect program for them. But at best, you're seeing them 2 to 3 hours a week. And you're not going to do an hour of just that one exercise. You're going to be doing a lot of different things. So giving them homework to do, doing things that are going to help unwind that and get them to be more balanced is super important. But what's also important is to ask them to think about changing that position that was getting them stuck in the first place.
Right.
Getting them out of that first, because guess what? You keep doing it, it's going to keep getting you back there. No matter how much you try and undo it, you're still going to go back.
Right. I always find with any particularly thoracolumbar fascia, but any kind of myofascial suit stiffnesses or real imbalances, I've got to look at, what are your habits? How are you sitting? How are you standing? How are you driving? What sport are you doing? And I've got to address that because, again, 1 hour a week, 2 hours a week, 3 hours a week is not going to make the change, even if they do some homework, if they are continuing 8 hours a day to have that leg over the other leg and the clipboard on their knee. And so that's really where I look. Like I'll have clients come behind my desk and sit, and I'll say, okay, just type something on my computer. And I'll watch them. And sometimes they're being very good, but sometimes you'll immediately see, oh, they lean to the right, they rotate in this way, they hold their arm up in a certain way. And you know, this is a person who's a graphic designer, for example. And so they're in that position at least 8 hours a day, all the time. And so those are the things like, okay, so let's see if we can change the daily habits, because that's really where your suit gets built and unbuilt, is how you hold yourself, not just in those hours of workout time, but in the rest of the day.
Yeah. And to be able to balance out, when I mentioned dentist neck, if you think about working in such a small space as a mouth, and now I'm noticing a lot more of them are using magnifying lenses on their glasses so that they don't have to lean into the mouth so far. And I'm finding that they're trying to take better care of their body. At least the dentists that I know, they've found ways to modify that. But some of the old school ones, they know what they know, and that's all that they know how to do. So when I work with them, I tell them, you're going to be doing this for 6 or 8 hours every day. You can't expect the 2 or 3 hours a week of what we're doing to make a huge difference in a short amount of time. What we need to do is effectively change how you're doing everything else, how you're doing your job, so that you're still effective. I don't want to take that away from you because you're great at your job. I've seen this with surgeons. I've seen this with a lot of people who have to sort of stay in one specific place for a long period of time and not move. Their whole body sort of gets rigid there. It's like, okay, we have to find the best, most optimum position for you. And that's sometimes what our job is to try and find that for them and train them to be there, because that's going to make a huge change. And then all the exercise you're doing on top of that, oh, it's gravy. It's going to get them to be a better mover in the end. But you got to change, what got them there in the first place.
One other thing I want to bring in here, since we are talking about fascia, is the role of either myofascial release or really good manual work on here.
Yeah.
So for sure, one of the challenges with super tight fascia, whether it's in the low back or anywhere else, is it will respond slowly to stretching and mobility work, but it's a kind of a slow process. I think if you're really just doing stretching and mobility work, and sometimes a really good body worker, particularly people who do things like structural integration or raw finger, that kind of thing, can go in and loosen up or literally break some of those fascial connections. And then you've got more mobility that then you can train. So, and whether that's, again, a good manual therapist or whether it's milder work like rolling and balls and that kind of thing, sometimes that can really make progress in decreasing tension in fascial tissues. And it's an important part of working with people with fascial issues.
And if you think about it, not just from the fascial point of view, but also just from a circulatory point of view, because you need to get some circulation back in there, because a lot of those tissues haven't gotten a whole lot of work done on them, manual work or stretching, not beyond stretching, but foam rolling or whatnot, that you're not going to get enough blood flow there. You're not going to get that. And you're definitely not going to see that. We like to refer to it sort of like a sponge when it comes to fascial tissue, that's squeezing out of the hydration of the water and letting go and letting it come back in. And the more you do that, the more receptive it is to hydration, and the tissues become much more hydrated. And when they're hydrated, they're much more receptive to being able to move. That a lot of times I'll teach someone very easily how to take a small ball, somewhat a little firm, and put it against the wall and literally rubbing like along their iliac crest. Because a lot of times I find the QL, much more than the erectors for some people, the QL really can lock down. And just by releasing that a little bit, getting into that area, oh my gosh, they'll hit a spot and you'll see their eyes light up and, oh yeah. And I'll say, okay, maybe not that hard, maybe nice and gentle. hold it and then move a little bit. Hold that spot, move a little bit. And I say, now do that a couple times a day or once a day just to get some more blood flow to the area. Then every other day is enough because we also want it to heal in between. But a lot of times it's just getting that hydration to be pumped in and out of that can really make a huge difference.
Well, again, if you're replacing muscle tissue, especially with fascial tissue, it means you're decreasing the blood supply in the area. And especially if somebody is then, so, if you think about like nice, juicy muscle tissue that gets stringier and stringier because there's more and more collagen in there, it's going to lose some of its blood supply. And then if you stop moving, you got the same problem. So myofascial release for that, movement for that, things that get circulation going, that's when healing happens. That's when change happens. You've got to get fluid in and out of there. You've got to get things moving.
Yep. I mean, how many times have you had an area that's bothering you? It's like, oh, I can't, it's just bugging. And you and I are both body workers. So I'll just get my thumb in there.
Yeah, exactly.
And a lot of times it's that lateral line. It's the glute med, it's the QL, it just gets grouchy. And I'll get in there and I'll just start doing a little cross fiber friction or a little, positional point press and hold on to it. And then I stand up and it feels so much better. Well, you can teach your clients the same thing with small balls. They usually can't do it with their hands because they're not that, they don't know what they're they don't know what they know and what they don't know.
They're doing. They don't know what they're doing.
They have no idea, which is why don't give them one of those little thumper devices. There are all sorts of different ones out there to try and release this. If you don't know what you're doing, you can actually cause a lot of bruising and a lot of more harm than good. If you know what you're doing with them, Topotment devices, Theragun, whatever that you want, those can be very beneficial if you know what you're doing. If not, when you try and get into the low back where we don't have a lot of structure like the rib cage, it's not holding itself together. Those bones are they're in there kind of loose a little bit. They're held in there, but I mean, you can do some damage to them if you start pressing into the transverse processes, with one of those with a lot of force, and that can do some damage.
You also, just as a precaution there, you've also got the kidneys right under the 12th rib.
Yeah.
And the 12th rib, which can be, I've had a few clients get overzealous in their rolling on their low back, even just with a roller, and really cause some trouble. Either one of them actually dislocated the 12th rib, which really was not good. And another one, she was like, she really went after it. And the next day she said, "Oh, there was blood in my urine." I said, "You damaged your kidney. Like, don't do that." So I know these are extreme, but that's a good warning,
happens.
right? It happens, but stay on the tissue. Don't go up onto that 12th rib. Be really cautious with that.
And I'm going to warn people this, in the melt method, I've studied the melt method. There's something called masses and spaces. Like your rib cage is a mass. Your thoracic area in general, is a mass. Your lumbar would be a space because there's not a lot of support there. You don't want to necessarily roll on the spaces because you don't have as much support. Your pelvis is much more of a mass. It's a lot more stable. So if you're laying on something like a foam roller, for instance, I don't know how much you weigh, but I've got a pretty decent amount of weight on top of that bugger. So I don't want to necessarily do that to an area that I can cause damage. So I always tell people, I don't like people rolling on their low back itself. You can do a little bit of your QL if you're lying on your side. You can get around the iliac crest. I don't like the lower ribs. Like you said, the floating ribs, they don't like it. Try and be careful and cautious. You can still approach it from a different perspective. And guess what? If you're not a body worker and you're not an expert in this, find a body worker that knows what they're doing and refer out.
And refer out. Absolutely.
Because you'll see so much more benefit. I find that a lot of younger trainers, Pilates instructors and things, we kind of want to be jack of all trades. We want to help our client out so much that we want to do it all. And we want to prove to them that we know what we're doing. I say I prove to them that I know what I'm doing a lot faster when I say, you know what? Right above me in the studio, right above me is an amazing massage therapist. His name's Jason. I want to send you to him. Here's his number.
Exactly.
And they say, "Oh, okay. And now I've given you permission to go get a massage. Hey, how about that?" Some
No,
people need permission.
absolutely. No, I mean that one of the best things I had when I had my studio was there was a body worker who we found, and oh my God, he was like, we sent so many.
Oh yeah.
I think we were responsible for creating his practice, honestly.
Yeah.
But the differences we'd see, I mean, we would make between him and us, progress would be
Huge difference.
twice as fast, easily.
Yes,
Because he really
easily.
knew he was very effective. He was, I mean, not every body worker is effective either. It's like every Pilates teacher is not particularly effective, and every personal trainer isn't particularly effective. But if you get a good one,
Hmm.
unbelievable. Like working in concert with somebody, or a good chiropractor, if you've got a good one, they can make all the difference in the world. And again, if
Yep.
they kind of get it moving, get it loosened up, and then you train it in that new position, boom, you can make magic.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. And to find one, I'm going to tell people this: ask around, ask physical
Yes.
therapists that you know if they know of anybody, because a lot of times they've been at this for a while, they know, and try them out yourself.
Yeah.
You'll know pretty fast. You and I have done a lot of body work, so we kind of know. As soon as someone puts their hands on me, and nothing's worse than when they're giving you a massage, you're just like, oh, you're wasting my time.
Exactly. When
You know,
it's bad. It's like,
you know it's bad.
oh.
It's just like, no, I'm done. Yeah, I'm done. But when someone gets in there and you know, wow, this person's got it. They know exactly what they're going for. I remember I had this guy. I literally built his practice. I'm not kidding. We sent him so many people at a time when he was just trying to get to that next level, of having his own studio and everything. I sent him so many people.
Mhm.
I've got a very dense thoracic area. It's very dense tissue. And I've never had anybody that's been able to go into it. And this is not a big man. He's a lot smaller than I am. And when he was pressing, he said, okay, I'm going to try something. And he started pushing it. I'd never felt this before. I didn't feel the top layer. I didn't even feel the middle layer. I felt like he was going only into the deep layer. And I mean, I said, I don't know what you're doing or how you're doing it. He said, oh, it's a technique I learned from Yadi. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh. As soon as he did that, I said, sold. I knew he knew what he was doing.
You are my man. Yeah, exactly.
Because he got me to move so quickly because he knew what he was doing. And I knew I could trust him, that I could send everybody to him without a problem. I could just say,
Yep.
here you go. Work with this person. So yeah, find someone you can, try them out yourself. You'll know if they're even halfway decent.
I also go by,
it's a good way for you to get referrals too.
It is. And I also go by
yeah.
client referrals. Just the ones that some clients are like, I think of one client particularly. She saw a chiropractor twice a week for like forever. And as far as I could tell, it didn't do anything. Like really, like that was not a recommendation that I would have followed, because it's pretty clear that this was just a, money-making scenario. Another client who would go, went every now and then when they needed a tune-up, and I would see radical changes in their body. I would go, okay, that's the one I want to send people to. So sometimes clients can be good resources for that.
No, 100%. I always ask clients when someone says, oh, I had the most amazing massage. I said, really? Who?
Exactly.
I mean, right away, I'm like, I want their name
always.
and their information, because that's the only way I actually found the guy that we use now, who's literally upstairs from me in a beauty place. I mean, it's the husband of the person who owns a facial, beauty.
Yes,
she's a physician. Yeah, she's a physician, but she specializes in, dermatological type stuff.
Right.
And I never would have ever walked in that. Yeah, I never would have walked into that because I've never looked into it. But he came to me for what he needed for his body. And we started talking, and I realized he knows what he's talking about. And immediately I was like, oh, this guy's good. I've sent him so many people now. So sometimes you do just stumble upon these people as well. And when you do, hoard them. I mean, literally.
Yeah, exactly.
Keep your list of who's good. I have my physical therapists. I have my massage therapists, my chiropractors. I have all of them listed because, man, you never know when you're going to need one. But you need to have your list, your referral list.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid. We haven't talked about referring much, but don't be afraid to just call people up and say, hey, I'm a blah, blah, blah. I'm a personal trainer and Pilates teacher, and I'm working with these clients that have these issues. And I'd love to, like, I've taken people out to lunch before. Just say, hey, I'd love to take you out to lunch and just talk about what you do. If they're like, oh, I'm too busy for that, I said, hey, can I just bring a cup of coffee and chat with you at your office? right? Just sometimes just getting to know them. I've
Mm-hmm.
learned so much from all the practitioners that I've worked with over the years. And again, boy, if you've got a good referral network, you're golden.
Mm-hmm. And one of my clients calls it his Jewish mafia,
Yeah.
because he's Jewish, but all his doctors, he's like, he has a cardiologist, he has a dermatologist, he has all of them,
Right.
and he knows who to go to, who's the best in the area, and
Yeah.
he's got
Yeah.
his team. And I love
Yeah.
that. And I've gotten to know a lot of them. And it's like, oh my gosh, these guys are fantastic. They are fantastic at what they do. So you know what? They go on my referral list. And that's
Yeah.
how you really begin to build that, is by talking with them. And especially with physicians, once they know that you know what you're doing, man, they will send you people, because they know what they don't know, and we know things that they don't.
Yes, absolutely. And if they're an open-minded physician, not all are,
Yes.
and they're
Not
happy
all
to
are.
refer you to them. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. So thoracolumbar fascia.
Yep. It has a lot to do with low back pain. And
Yeah.
again, movement. Movement is the key. We say this every week. I mean, moving conversations, it's called this for a reason, gang. This is all about movement. We're movement professionals. We get people to move better. That's our job. And guess what? When they have something like low back pain, thoracolumbar fascia has a lot to do with it. So hopefully you've learned a little bit more about the thoracolumbar fascia and how it can lead to low back pain, but not only that, what you can do with it and what you should do for it.
Keep it moving. And so much of keeping it moving is rotation and lateral flexion. And just, I think the other thing we also encourage in this podcast is just diving a little deeper, going
Mhm.
beyond like the exercise you're supposed to do and really seeing that body in front of you and going, oh, wow, that's a weird thing. They're only going side bending to the right. They don't side bend to the left. All right, well, let's look at that. Right. So
Mhm.
it's that encouragement too, to just keep looking deeper, keep kind of uncovering things, uncovering asymmetries, uncovering different ways that people move, and then seeing how you can affect those, how you can make those more balanced.
Yep. I had a client once tell me that I was a body detective, and that's really
Yes.
the way to sort of look at it. We do. We are looking at first of all, what do we see? How do we see it? And where do we go from here?
Yep.
And that's really what assessment is. And that's what we're doing in this. So investigate, dig deeper, and don't be afraid to, push them a little bit in that direction.
And don't be afraid to know when you don't know something. So
Oh, yeah.
investigation, like I've been watching for some random reason. I'm watching Columbo. All right, I'm rerunning
I
like
love
Columbo.
Columbo.
Right now, so like the detective, right? So you see how, like, just like what we do, we get an idea in our mind, a hypothesis,
Mhm.
if you will, right? Oh, they're a little tight here. There's something going on there. Maybe I need to strengthen this or loosen that. And then we go
Mhm.
down that path. We explore that path. And sometimes, yeah, boom, hit it on the first, right out of the gate. You keep going in that path and you make change. Sometimes you go down that path, you make a little bit of progress, but then you get stuck. And you've got to look for
Mhm.
what's the next step, what's the next clue, if you will, to use the detective analogy. And you find another clue, and then you go down that path, and you just slowly build that, right? It is an investigation, and you are a
Yep.
body detective. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, hopefully you did learn something. You got some practical application out of this as well. Thank you guys again for joining us. We really appreciate every one of you. Do us a favor, hit that like and subscribe button, comment, like, post, repost. We really appreciate it. You can always reach out to us at movingcombos@gmail.com, especially if you'd like one of us or both of us to come to your facility and teach your students. We'd be more than happy to do that. We're always open for that. So do us a favor, reach out. We'd be more than happy to discuss that. So for Nora St. John, I'm Brian Ritchie. We'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.